thank you all for joining us this evening. To introduce myself, my name is Jonah, and I am the product marketing manager at Sports Reference for our Stathead products. Also here tonight, we have Sam, who is our digital marketing manager, who produces all of the webinars that we do, and she does a fantastic job. And we also have Katie, who is the customer success manager for Stathead. So if you have questions after the webinar, or if you've ever emailed us with any sort of issues or questions about Stathead, she is the one who answers it. She'll be here to help out as well. As I'm going through all of this, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. Is probably the easiest way to do it. Or you can use the Q&A option, and then that way we can either answer you in the chat, or I'll pick it up and answer it here on the video later. Either way, we'll probably do a little of both. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So the first thing I'm going to do here is share my screen. So this is the Basketball Reference homepage, as I'm sure you're familiar. This is the front page of Basketball Reference. And I'm going to start with the first part of this presentation by kind of showing you some of the advanced stats that you can find on Basketball Reference for the WNBA without a Stathead subscription, and the places you can go to find those. A lot of these will end up also being in Stathead. So you'll be able to do more advanced searches digging into these stats once we get to the Stathead portion. But to start with, I just want to go through some of the cool stuff that I think people don't always realize we have on the WNBA side. So this is the front page of the site. And then you see on our kind of gray nav bar on top, we have a whole section for the WNBA. And if you click that, you get this same sort of Basketball Reference front page, but for the WNBA. So we've got last night's scores, we've got the standings. I know a lot of people like to play the game where you look at the randomly generated block of 12 players and try to see how many you can identify. So if you are a WNBA super fan, you can go and see how many of those if you like to do that. Feel free to tag us on Twitter or Instagram or anything if you're doing it. We always love to see people playing that game. So this is the WNBA section, and it has a lot of the stuff you would assume. Obviously, scores, standings, and basic stats. But one thing that I think that people don't always realize we have is advanced stats. So if you scroll down on a player page like this one, and you scroll down kind of past the sort of standard points, assists, rebounds, that section, eventually you'll get to this section called advanced stats. And on the advanced stats section, you'll see a lot of the advanced stats that you're probably familiar with if you are a stats person or watch a lot of basketball. So here we have PER, which is player efficiency rating. That's sort of an all-in-one number that sort of covers everything a player does on the court. And 15, it means an average-ish player. 22, like we see here in 2020, means a great player. If it's in the 10, 9, 8 range, maybe not so good. And then you'll see these sort of percentages like rebounding percentage, assist percentage. These are good ways to kind of take those box score stats like assists and rebounds and adjust it for the time that the player is on the floor and the sort of overall team performance. So if someone has low assist numbers but a high assist percentage, maybe they're playing in a system where there's not a lot of ball movement, or maybe they're not getting a lot of time on the floor, but when they are on the floor, they're maximizing the amount of assists they have. Usage percentage is one of my favorite ones to look at. That just means how many possessions a player is using in terms of either finishing it with a shot, a free throw, or a turnover. So that's cool. And then another one of our main advanced stats is win shares. Win shares are very good, especially for putting players into sort of historical context. You'll see me doing a lot of win share search when we get to the Stathead part of this presentation. So we've got that. And then down here, we've also got data that we use play-by-play to generate. So what that means is that we have kind of a record of every play. from this season and last season and so forth. And we can use that to determine things like what was the team's net rating when that player was on the floor? What was the difference in net rating when that player was on the floor versus when they were off the floor? And all this stuff is interesting, but you might be saying to yourself, like, it's cool to see all of this for one player, but how do I see it for everybody? How do I know how this stacks up to the other players in the league? So the way to do that is we're going to go to the season page now. So this is the season page for 2021. So I'll skip ahead to 2022. And on here, you can kind of see sort of just these general tables with the general team stats that we were talking about earlier on at team level. So you can see most team assists per game and most team rebounds per game. Here you can see the team advanced stats, like which team has the best rating. It's the Sun, which I believe Adam in the chat, that was his pick for the champion. Off to a great start there. Same with the Aces, another popular pick I saw. These are clearly like the two best teams by a substantial margin, which is what we would expect based on what we've been seeing on the floor from them. But you can also see, you know, the team's true shooting percentage, their rebounding percentage, and all of that stuff. So this is the season page. What I'm going to do is go up to here and go to this kind of little gray bar underneath that Captain Crunch ad. And I'm going to come over here to player stats. And you'll see, once I've highlighted it over player stats, you'll see links to things with the titles of those tables that we were looking at earlier, per game totals, per 36 minutes, per 100 possessions, etc. And that's because when you click on that, you're getting the same stats that are in those tables. But instead, this is now a table of everybody's stats from that season. So instead of looking at one player's per game stats, now I have the whole league's per game stats, and I can sort it by anyone I want just by clicking on the column header. So I just did points to get the high scores. I could do assists just as easily. So that's obviously clear, but that means that those stats that we were talking about earlier, those play-by-play stats, you can also see the leaders in that over here. So if I want to see who has the biggest differential and when they're on the floor versus when they're off the floor, I would click on off and get the results. And you'll see this does not filter for minutes played or any sort of threshold. So obviously up here we have someone who's played 5 minutes, probably at the end of kind of like a game that had been decided. So not super interesting to look at, but if we just go 2 rows down, we can see Ariel Atkins, who has played over 600 minutes, very meaningful sample size. And Washington is 26.6 points per 100 possessions better when she is on the floor than when she's on the bench. Brianna Turner has about a 25.5 point differential in that. So these are the players who have the single biggest difference. They're having the single biggest impact when they're on the floor versus when they're off the floor. So when I'm looking at stuff like MVP candidates or like who are really the most impactful players, this is the stuff, this is kind of one of the first places I'm going, as well as those advanced stats and those general box score stats, because you can really see the impact a player is having. And of course, if I click on it again, it'll sort it in the opposite order. So I can see who's having the biggest negative impact when they're on the floor, as well as who's having the biggest positive impact. In addition to those plus minus stats that I showed you, we can also use the play-by-play data to generate shooting statistics. And what those shooting statistics can tell us is like both what percentage of a player's field goal attempts are coming from each point on the floor. So we can see here, this is 0 to 3 feet from the basket. This is basically what we consider at the rim and the restricted area, that sort of thing. 3 to 10, you can think of that as the paint. And then we have this mid-range zone and then 3. So we can see who's taking the most shots at the rim, who has the most active mid-range game, who's taking the most threes. And then we can also see how they're shooting in each of those distances. So not just how frequently are they shooting from 16-foot, mid-range, how frequently are they making those shots as well, and stuff like that. We can even see the percentage of field goals that are assisted, or their corner threes, or the average distance from the basket when they take their shot. So all kinds of cool stuff like that. And so those are a couple of the big things, I did want to mention that we recently built out our transactions database. So we have historic transactions for the WNBA, I think going all the way back to the beginning. And so if you're ever curious, if you ever just want to look over the lists of trades and free agent signings and player movement, you can see all of that on the transactions page. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is if you go to one of the box scores for the game, for one of the games, there's a lot of cool stuff in here as well. So here, this is a game between the Sky and the Lynx. And you can see kind of the basic box score. Here we have the basic box score stats. And then up here above it, we have this thing, which you can probably guess correlates to quarters and halves. So instead of showing these box score stats for the full game, you can see them for just the first quarter, just the second quarter, the second half, whatever you're looking for on there. Then you can see the complete play-by-play for the game. So this is every single play in the game, as well as kind of some game summary information, like scoring droughts and lead changes and ties and all of that stuff. You can see a shot chart. So you can see it for the whole team or for single players, where are their shots coming from and how frequently did they make or miss them. You can break that down by quarter too, if you feel the need. And then lastly, we've got plus minus data. So you can actually, and it's kind of arranged in like a really interesting visual way. So you can actually see through the course of the game, when is a player on the floor? When do they go to the bench? And then while they're on the floor, what is happening in that stint? As well as kind of in brackets there, their overall on and off, kind of their overall net impact on the game from a plus minus perspective, which is obviously not a perfect stat, but can be interesting to look at, especially when you get to the playoffs. I'm looking at this all the time to see like what tactical moves are shifting the series, what players are giving a team an advantage, what players are giving a team a disadvantage. All of that stuff is really cool to follow along with as we're, as we get into like the real, crunch time, the margins narrow, games can be won and lost in the 60-second stint, all of that stuff. So with that now kind of like prologue, I'm going to move over to Stathead, and we will take a look at what is on there. So this is Stathead. If I think that everyone who answered the poll was either an active subscriber or a previous subscriber, but just in case you're someone who's totally new to it, I'll just mention that Stathead is a premium sort of like stats service that we've put together that basically allows you to go inside of the databases that we operate to answer more complex questions. So I just showed you how to find single season leaders in the stats we have. And I showed you how to go to a player's page and look up their stats. But you may be trying to answer more complex questions than just how many points does Breanna Stewart have this year, or who has the best PER in the league this year. You might be trying to answer more complicated stuff than that. That's where Stathead comes in. So it's $8 a month for one sport, and so in this case, we're going to be going into Stathead Basketball, which will give you tools for both the NBA and the WNBA. And in fact, for the most part, they will be the same tools. So right now we have WNBA stats in two tools, the Player Season Finder and the Player Game Finder. Those were initially separate tools that we built out specifically for the WNBA. Now what we're doing is we're going through and basically like upgrading all of the tools that we have built out over the years. So some of these are many years old, more than like 5, 6, 7, 10 years old in some cases. So they need a little bit of, so we're giving them a bit of a refresh. And so as part of that, we're making sure to incorporate the WNBA stats into every single tool that we have on Stathead. So right now they're in the Player Season Finder and the Game Finder. And then at the end of this, after I've showed you those two, we're going to take a little sneak peek at the next place that they're going to be added to, probably in a week or two. You'll be seeing it on there. And then as we go through and refresh all of these other tools, the WNBA stats will also be appearing in there. So for starters, we're going to go into the Player Season Finder. This is without a doubt our most popular tool, and our sort of go-to is the one that I spend the most time on by far. And so we're going to take a look at what you can do in here. So basically, this is where you answer questions about single seasons, multiple seasons, careers, and then kind of different dimensions of those single season searches. Maybe not necessarily on the player level, but maybe on the team level or on the season level, or stuff like that. I apologize if you hear my dog absolutely destroying my recycling in the background. He has gotten into the recycling bin and is just going wild, but there's nothing in there that's like, bad or anything. He's just making a mess. So feel free. So ignore that. My apologies. So what we're going to do now is take a look at some searches you can set up. And obviously the first thing I want to point out that's going to be super relevant for what we're doing is this league drop-down section. Right now it's set to NBA stats. There's also an ABA option. There's a combined NBA and ABA option. And then lastly, there's a WNBA option. So when we click that toggle, it's going to change over and no longer be searching NBA stats. Instead, it's going to be searching WNBA stats. So that's the first thing we want to do when we're doing a search in there. So right now, what I'm set up to do, if I do nothing else, if I've just done that, it's going to look for the single season with the most win shares in WNBA history, because as you can see, it's selected find single seasons matching criteria, and it's going to sort by win shares. And I've selected the WNBA. So I'll just do this just to kind of like, this is like a first step search. So here we go. These are the players with the most win shares in a single season. But that's the kind of question that we don't need Stathead to answer. There's a leaders page on the WNBA section that would show us this information as well. So here's where it starts to get interesting. What if I want to see players who had, let's say, 6 win shares and 700 points? Who had a season with 6 win shares and 700 points? So I can leave this as is. We'll worry about the top section with the search types in a moment. In order to set up this search, what I'm going to do is go to search criteria down here, and I'm going to scroll down a bit. I'm going to scroll past all of these sort of drop downs and options and go to these filters. So we have 3 types of filters in here. Statistical filters. These are all of the stats, basically. So points, assists, rebounds, shooting percentage. You can also see the advanced stats like win shares and PER and all of that good stuff. Then we've got the biographical filters. These are like the biographical details of the player. So their age in the season in question. Are they left or right-handed? Where did they go to college? When were they drafted? When did they debut, etc. And then lastly, these status filters are cool because they let us look for active players or all-star selections or Hall of Famers or players who won awards like MVP or All NBA or All WNBA. So in this case, like I said, we're doing 700 points and 6 win shares. So both of those are stats. So I went to the statistical filter, and you see they popped up: points, 700, win shares. I just typed in 6, and you can see over here, you can choose greater than or less than or exactly. In this case, we went greater than or equal to 700 and greater than or equal to 6. I'm now going to run the search. And there we go. So now these are the results. So now we've narrowed that list down. Initially, it had over 100. I think that when I cut it off at 6, that would have been about 85-ish players. We've narrowed that down to 10. These are the 10 players who had at least 6 win shares and at least 700 points in any season in WNBA history. And I can sort this by season if I want to see who did it most recently. I can sort it by team if I just kind of want to see them I can sort it alphabetically if I feel like doing that for whatever reason. So you can see within the table, I can actually resort all of this stuff if there's a third dimension that I want to bring to this that for some reason I didn't put into there initially. So that is that. So what if I want to do a more expansive search across multiple seasons? Let's say I want to look at careers. The way to do that is change the search type. So up here, these are called the search types, and there are 6 of them. The one we're using now is find single seasons. There's also find combined seasons, find players with the most seasons matching the criteria, find the most players in a season, find the most players in a team, and find the most players on a team in combined seasons. So I'm going to go through and explain what each of these is with sort of an example. So right now we just did a single season search, but if I want to search across multiple years or the entire career or the entire history of the WNBA, I would switch to find combined seasons or careers matching criteria. Now I'm going to be searching by default every year in WNBA history. And it's going to give me a combined stat line, not just a single season one. So I'll do the search, but I'll raise this up. We'll say 3,000 points and 30 win shares because I like the symmetry of that. And I will run the search. And we've got ourselves our list of 45 players who hit both of those thresholds in WNBA history. And again, it could have been any threshold. I could have gone higher with that one. I could have gone lower. I could have added another thing. So if I want to add, how about 1,000 rebounds? I'll add that in and then run that. And there we go. Now we've had 1,000 rebounds. We only lost a couple players with that one. But you can see if I wanted to stack up a biographical filter, let's say I wanted to see lefties, only lefties, I can do that as well. None of them did it. Sorry to my lefty viewers for the unintentional call out there. If I wanted to only see players who went to UConn who did it, I can go to this college filter and scroll down to UConn and run the search again. And then in a few seconds, there we go. So these are the 7 players who went to UConn and matched the other criteria we were using. So I can keep doing that. I can keep adding more and more filters. But you get the idea. That works the same as a single season filter, except across multiple seasons. The next one is find players with the most seasons matching criteria. So what this is going to do is now we're back to searching single seasons. But the difference is that instead of just a list of every season that matches the criteria, it's going to look at every player and say, how many times did they have a season like this? How many times did they do this? So if we revert back to sort of the original search, which was, I think 6 win shares and, oh, I got rid of points, but it was like 6 win shares and 700 points. So if I do that and run this search, we can see the list. So now it's not just showing us like who did it, but showing us who did it the most times. Unsurprisingly, Diana Taurasi tops this list. She's the only one who did it in multiple years. And then if I want to go and see the list of every season, I can click on this seasons list and it'll show me the 2 years where she did it in her full stat line. So again, if I wanted to see, so you can also think about this and get kind of creative with some of the other filters. So remember I mentioned there are these like awards filters. So if I wanted to see, this would be one way to see who had the most all-star selections. If I wanted to see that, I could just toggle all-star DS. And then if I run this search, we'll see, there we go. Sue Bird made 12 all-star teams. That's the most of anybody in our database. We could do the same thing with awards if I wanted to do that, and stuff like that. So most seasons, matching criteria, who did X the most times, who had the most 20 point per game seasons, who had the most 7 assists, 7 rebound per game seasons, who had once you get going on these, you can take them anywhere. But what if you want to answer questions that don't directly relate, where the answer isn't a single player, but maybe a season or multiple years? That's what this bottom row is there for. So we can do find most players in a season matching criteria, and this will show us which season had the most players that match the search criteria we set up. So if I wanted to see what season had the most UConn players make the all-star team, I would do the all-star selection filter I turned on earlier, and I would do the UConn filter I turned on earlier. There it is. And then I would toggle to find most players in a season matching criteria. And I would run the search. So 2017, there were 7 players who were UConn alum who made it to the All-Star game. So that's 7 players, 2017, that's the most. And you'll see the list of all the individual players as well as the count. And yeah, so that's that one. We could also do find most players on a team in a season matching criteria. So what if I want to see the team that had the most all-stars in a single season? I took off the UConn filter, I left the all-star selection on, and I changed the search type. And now I'm going to run the search. And we can see that the Connecticut Sun with 5, I think they had a different name back then, maybe, but the Aces with 4, Lynx with 4, several times, in fact. The Lynx did it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So these are the teams that had the most all-stars in a single season. And then the last option is find most players for a team in combined seasons or careers matching criteria. So this is the same thing as the search I was doing before, but instead of a single season, now we're searching across multiple seasons. So if I ran the search the way it's set up right now, what it's going to show me is the most all-stars all time selected from any franchise. And there we go. And again, as you see, you can see the full list of all the players who meet the criteria. This is just players who had 1 all-star appearance in their career. So it's a good example. Like Sue Bird only shows up on this list once because even though she made 12 all-star games, for these purposes, she counts as 1 player. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're running a search like this. So those are all of the search types and search filters in the season finder, which is the most popular tool, the one that I spend the most time in, the one that I think our users probably use the most. And one last thing I want to mention before we move on is just under the season type, you'll see that I could toggle this from regular season to playoffs, and then I can do these same sorts of searches with playoff stats. It's all the same stats, all the same filters, all the same search types. We're just using postseason stats instead of regular stats. And same deal with this. We have a position filter. So if you want to see which guard had the most rebounds, or which center had the most assists, or things like that, you could use the position toggles and narrow it down by position if for whatever reason that the question you're looking for involves the position the player is playing. So that's the season finder. And the next thing I'm going to show you is that, so, you know, we've said, like, if we want to answer single season or multiple season questions, this is the tool we can use. But what if we are looking more on a game level? In that case, we would want to go to the game finder. So I'm going to go back. This is the front page. You can either get to it by hovering over this basketball thing in the nav bar and then clicking game finder there, or you can just click basketball and go back to the front page, and then you'll see the list of tools. So I'm going to go over here to the player game finder. And you see this is set up exactly the same way as the season finder. So we've got the search types on top, we've got the search criteria over here, and we've got the results over here. And once again, I'm going to change it to WNBA and just run the search. So now we're going to get the most points in a single game in WNBA regular season history. I remember that Liz Cambridge game when she scored 53. That is the record. It's an incredible game. So we can use this kind of the same way that we used the season finder a moment ago. So we could use it to just look for single games and put together a list of every player who hit a certain stats threshold. So like if I want to do, let's say 40-point, 10 rebound games, I'll go to points under the statistical filters. I'll do 40. I'll go to rebounds and do 10 and run the search. And there we go. Here's every 40-10 game in WNBA history. You'll notice that the statistical filters look very similar to the ones in the season finder. The only difference is that the sort of season level advanced stats no longer make sense. There's no reason to have per 36 or stuff like that. Like per game, obviously, we're in the game finder, so it's just the stats. So rebounds, assists, true shooting percentage, game score, points, any of that stuff. All of that stuff is in there. We also have the player filters, which are similar to the biographical filters from the season finder. So you can see stuff like team, age, year, position. But we also have some game specific stuff. So like if you want to see players, how players did on their birthday if someone just happens to go off on a game on their birthday and you're like, I wonder how many other times that's happened before, we have a filter for that. If someone comes off the bench and has a great performance, you can go to started game and select no, and that will give you bench players instead of starters. And then I also just want to point out that we have these options for double doubles and triple doubles. So if you want to just search among double doubles or just search among triple doubles, you can do that. And I know that like this is obviously a double double, but it's not all 40-point double doubles necessarily, because they could have 10 assists or 10 steals or 10 blocks. And if I lower this threshold to 20 points, that gets even way more likely that I will be missing a lot of double doubles if I'm only doing rebounds. So having those options means that you can get every kind of double double or every kind of triple double without having to run multiple searches or keep multiple windows open, that sort of thing. And then the last options are game filters. So obviously these relate to sort of the context of the game, your opponent, did you win or lose? Did you, was the game, home or away? The month, the date of the game, whether it went to overtime, all of that stuff. So if I want a list of, I guess we'll do 20-point, I'm not sure if this one will work. I'll do 20-point triple doubles in a loss, and we'll see what we get. All right, so we did get one. Sabrina Ionescu did it just a couple weeks ago, in fact. So some WNBA history there. So you can see we can combine all of these filters across. You can see I did one of each here. So there's no limit to the number of filters you can put on this or which section you have to take them from. You can do it anywhere. I also want to point out this option, span of games. This lets you designate games within a season or a playoff series. So like a winner takes all game 5, or the first game of the season. And then there are also options for the player their game number in the season. So like if someone sits out and only plays 15 games in a season, you can sort through their 15 games instead of the 15 game, instead of on the team level when the numbers may not quite match up. And then with career, you can get a player's first 100 games, you could get their first 500 games, whatever sort of you're trying to do in the career thing, you can do that. So one interesting thing about this that works really well in conjunction with the next search type I'm going to show you, which is these find totals. What these do are they find combined stat lines for all of the games that match the criteria that we're searching. So whereas before we were just looking up single game stats, with these options, I can look up multi-game stats. So like I said, down here, I can look up the first 50 games of a player's career. And then I can go to find totals from all games in combined seasons or career by player matching criteria. This is the across multiple seasons search instead of find totals from a season, which is the single season search. So now I'm going to do that, and I'll sort by points. And now when I run the search, it's going to give me the most points by a WNBA player in the first 50 games of their career. And here we see Cynthia Cooper right there at the top, 1,120 points. Obviously a different era, but you can look down this list as well, see who else has kind of cracked this list. If there's a rookie who seems like they're bowling out, they're going crazy, you can easily just kind of pop the numbers that they're at right now into this search, figure out how many games in their career they're at, and run the search and see where they stack up all time. You can see a lot of kind of recent players up there on the top as well. So that's the combined games find totals option. Then the next kind of option is find players with the most games that match the criteria. Again, you can do a single season or across multiple years. This is going to be similar to that one I was showing you that was find players with the most seasons matching the criteria, where I put up the search and Taurasi had 2 seasons. I can put in the criteria for any kind of game and see who did it the most times, whether it's in a single season or across multiple years. So if I just want to see who had the most, let's say 20-point triple doubles, I can do that. And I could do this for one season, or I could do this for careers. Right now I'm doing single season. It's just INSQ in either case for that matter. So I'll drop off the points and we'll just do triple doubles. And it's because I this is my fault. I did not get rid of the player span of games filter. So that's one thing when you do this many searches in a row, the way I'm doing, sometimes it's easy to lose track and forget like what filters you have turned on and what filters you have turned off. So you just got to make sure to remember to turn all of that stuff to the correct setting. And if the results seem strange, just take another look at the filters and be like, I feel like something is off about that. So there we go. This makes a little more sense now. All right. Now these are the most triple doubles in a career. Candace Parker has 3, which is the most. And there you go. So those are kind of the core options, the ones I use the most, but we just added 3 new ones for WNBA searches. They're really cool. One is find teams with the most player games matching criteria. So now, instead of looking for players with the most matching games, the way I was doing a second ago, we're gonna look for teams who had the most player games. So let me go with double doubles instead. So this is gonna be what team had the most double doubles in a season. And there we go. You can see the Atlanta Dream had 33 in 2009. Sparks and the did 32 a couple times, as did Tulsa. Aces and Sun coming in with 31. Very good. Cool, interesting search. If you want to see who did these games, just click on the games link over here, and it will pull up the list of every single game that we have that matches that search. So you can see the full list of all of them and who did it and what the game was and all of that. You can do the same thing on the season level. So if I want to see what season had the most double doubles, I'll click find seasons with the most player games matching criteria. And now I've run the search, and it was 2021 with 219, followed by 2014. And again, if I click the games list, it'll give me the list of every single game that matches that search, all 219 of them in this case. And then lastly, if I want to find the number of players on a team matching criteria in a game. So all of these other searches we've been looking at for a while, since the very first one, since this one, they were all on like a season or multi-season level, but this is the game finder. So what if I want to find a game where 2 teammates, or a game with the most teammates who had a double-double? I would click that option, this last one, number of players on a team. And there we go. There's a game where 4 players on the Sparks had a double-double. Very cool. And we link to the box score for that game. We list the players who were involved in that game, all of that cool stuff. So that is the player game finder. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you the new addition to the WNBA Stathead suite. But before I do that, I want to mention one other cool Stathead feature, which is, let's say that you pull up a search and you want to take that search off of Stathead, either to do more research with it or to put it through some kind of graphing software to create sort of a nice graphic that you want to share with your readers, or you want to share on social media. If you want to use it to do more research, how do you do that? So this is probably not a search you'll be doing too often. It's every double-double in reverse alphabetical order, but for our purposes, it'll work for this. So in order to take any Stathead table off of Stathead to download it and work with it on your own, what you do is you hover your mouse over export data, and then you click this modify, export, and share table button. Is one way to do this. If you do that, what you can do is you'll get these options to eliminate certain rows or columns just by clicking that X. So if there's only certain rows or certain columns of this that are relevant to me, I can eliminate the rest of them pretty easily. And then once I have what I want, you'll see over here there are a lot of options for sharing it. So you can get an HTML table if you want to embed it on your website. If you want to post it to Reddit, we have it already formatted for Reddit. You just click the Reddit button and copy and paste what comes up. Same with the HTML. We've got all kinds of different like code type stuff. On the other hand, if you want to download it onto your computer, you can do that. Again, hover over export and click get as Excel workbook. And if you can see, it just downloaded an Excel file onto my computer with that information on it. And then I could also turn the table into a CSV, highlight and copy and paste it. Now, one caveat with this is that our tables have a maximum of 200 rows. So you can only do it one page at a time. So this search obviously was multiple pages. So in order to get the full breadth of the search, I'd have to go through every page by page and download each 200 row file. But eventually, once you're done, you will have, you can combine them all into one Excel file with all of the information that you wanted in it. So that is sharing. And now I'm going to show off the new Stathead feature. If you just give me 1 second to load it up. And I have to log in. All right. So the newest WNBA Stathead feature that is coming in the next couple of weeks. Right now, it's in testing. So I apologize if something goes wrong while I'm doing this. It's working very well. So there shouldn't be any issues. But just so y'all know, we haven't loaded it onto the site yet. But I wanted to just show you around some of the stuff you'll be able to do when it makes its debut in a couple of weeks. And this is the team game stats finder. So we were looking at the player game finder a moment ago. This is the same idea, but instead it's on the team level. So this is the first tool for Stathead that lets you look at WNBA team stats, which we're really excited about. So again, you'll see that sort of familiar Stathead setup. You've got the search types up here, the criteria over here, and the results over here. And again, we have the league option, so I will toggle it over to WNBA. And when I run the search, it'll give us the list of the highest scoring games by a single team in WNBA history. And you'll notice that just kind of at a glance at the table, you can see the score, you can see who won or lost, you can see whether the game went to overtime. Obviously, the more minutes game plays, the likelier it is that they're going to score more points. And then the important thing to keep in mind in this team stats finder is that there are going to be two categories of stats: team stats and opponent stats. You can think of that more or less as not exactly offense or defense, but it's team is the stats that the team accumulated. So team points are the points that they scored, and opponent points are the points that that team allowed. So we can see, so in Phoenix, for example, under points, they scored 127, and under opponent points, they allowed 124. I hope that makes sense. I'm not belaboring that point. It may be obvious to you, but I just wanted to point that out. The reason I don't want to make the offense defense distinction is that we have stats like defensive rebounds, blocks, and steals, which obviously like the team is doing on defense, but it's that team doing it. So team and opponent. In addition to the raw stats, you can use these to find net stats. So net points is simply point differential. So now instead of looking up the highest scoring game in WNBA history, I'm going to look up the biggest blowout. It was a 111-52 game where Minnesota crushed Indiana. You could see the same thing with rebounds or with steals or with advanced stats like net rating, net free throw attempt rate, net three-point attempt rate, and so on. In addition to the box score stats like points and three-pointers and rebounds and whatnot, we have advanced stats in here. So you can look at not just the raw point differential like I was looking at right now, but offensive rating, defensive rating, and net rating, the advanced stats that adjust scoring for possessions. So now I'm going to sort this by the best single game net offensive rating. So, or net rating. So instead of the biggest blowout by raw points, it's adjusted for possessions. It's still going to be the same game in this case, but you can see some of the games below it change a little bit because they may have had fewer possessions. And so they, like this one had a lower maybe net points, it was just a 40-point blowout. But by net rating, it was 63.3 when you adjust for the number of possessions each team had. So that is kind of how you do single game searches. But again, as you'll see up here, there are multiple search types. So I could switch it from single game to totals for all games in a season that match the criteria. This is the same search we were looking at earlier, where it's going to create a combined stat line for all of the games I'm looking at. So let's stick with net rating because I like that a lot. I use it a lot. And then I'll switch from, let's see a team's like net rating on the road. So what team had the best road net rating in a season? I'll go down to the game filters, which you will again recognize from the last tool, and I'll select away. You'll see there's all the same options. There's also an arena option in this one. I'm going to sort by net rating, and I'm doing totals from all games in a season matching criteria. So now we're going to see what team had the best road net rating in a season. It was the 1998 Houston Comets, who were plus 16.9 per 100 possessions in road games. That is a very, 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 very good net rating, especially when you consider they're not at home. Notice that the 2022 Aces are third on this list, that they have the best road net rating right now since 2000. So something to keep an eye on as the season keeps going. Can they keep up that road performance, or is it because they're playing super hot right now? Perhaps they've had an easier road schedule. This is one of those things that I would see in Stathead, and it would make me want to do more research and say, all right, wow, how are they doing this? What is behind this sort of thing? Can they actually push on and keep this not quite record breaking, but certainly in the modern era, record breaking type performance? And you'll note that, like, once again here, these are all combined stats for all the stats. So this is the team stats. So this is their offensive rating and their free throw rate and their 3-point rate. This is the opponent offensive rating. So the defensive rating of the Aces, how many free throws they're allowing, the 3-point rate they're allowing, the true shooting percentage they're allowing. And then this is the net, or the difference between what they're doing and what their opponents are doing. So that's fine totals. Again, we also have find teams with most games in a season matching criteria. This is, again, very similar to the search we were looking at earlier. So if I want to see what team, so let's change this one up a little bit. We'll see what team won the most games by 20 points in a season. So I'll do net points 20, and I'll do find teams with the most games matching criteria, and I'll run that search. And we get the 2019 Mystics, who won 13 games by 20 or more points. So that is quite an achievement. And as we scroll down, we can kind of look and see. It doesn't really look like anyone's going to come close to threatening them this year, unless I missed something. In addition to the statistical filters and the game filters, we also have these team filters, where you can sort by, like, did the team win the championship, or did the team make the playoffs? So what team had the most 20-point blowouts but didn't make the playoffs? That's kind of an interesting one to me. I'm just going to run it right now. So these are teams that won at least 4 games by 20 or more points but didn't make the playoffs. The Mystics did it in 2016. So that is that search filter. And then the last one is find seasons with the most team games matching criteria. So again, if instead of, it's the same sort of question, but if I wanted to see what season had the most 20-point blowouts instead of what team, I would do it in here. So like if I just happen to be like, man, all these games seem like they're getting really out of hand, or if it gets to the playoffs and it's like, wow, these playoff games, they're all blowouts. I wonder if this is the most that's ever happened. I could run the search and see that the record for 20-point blowouts in the playoffs was 5. So that's the kind of question you can answer in there. So that is, for the most part, going to cover it. But there is one last tool I wanted to mention. Right now, it's the only tool that is still kind of like a separate one for the WNBA, and it's the player comparison finder. So instead of going up here to these player or team tools, you'll scroll down to this section that's WNBA tools, and you'll click the player comparison finder. And you see that note about how we're combining the tools. So what this does is it lets you look at the stats of up to 6 players side by side for whatever reason you want. Perhaps you are arguing with a friend about who is better and you want to see their stats side by side. Perhaps you're trying to set your fantasy lineup and you have 3 players on the waiver wire and you want to see who is whose stats are the best, which one do you think you should take? You can do that in here. And you can see that we'll have not just like their per game stats, but totals adjusted for minutes and possessions. And then you can see their advanced stats and their playoff numbers. You can get up to 6 players side by side in here. And if you don't have a Stathead subscription, you can actually still do this with just 2 players, the way we're doing the default here with Cheryl Swoops and Diana Taurasi. But when you have the Stathead subscription, you can get up to 6 players. You can also do right now showing like career by default, but you could do single season too, or you could do a range of seasons. So if I want to do like Ionescu and Taurasi, I could either do like Sabrina Ionescu's 3rd season and Taurasi's 3rd season, or I could do their first 3 seasons. Either way, you know, whatever I wanted. But so this is that group of seasons especially comes in handy if you're trying to compare sort of like new players to historic players. You can get their stats from early in their career lining up side by side, and take a look at those. So that's the comparison finder. It is a cool tool. All right, I'll do one last call for questions. Also, one last call for your championship pick. Perhaps some of the stats we saw tonight change your mind. Maybe that Aces, you know, road stat made you think that they're going to win the title now. Go ahead and drop any questions in there. So I'm not seeing any. So I think that we're going to go ahead and call it then. But if you do have any questions, the last thing I'm going to mention is just that we love to help and support our stat heads. So if you have any questions, feel free to you can go to this help and support page and look around. You can also go up here to this contact us and send us an email. We have a contact form on every page. So if you just going back to the Stathead page, if I scroll down to the bottom here, you can see this question. You can send us feedback. We'll have pop-ups asking you to send us feedback. You can also just email us. Just open up your email browser. That's probably the easiest. And send an email to support@stathead.com. That's support, SUPPORT, @stathead.com. And Katie, who is our customer success manager, is happy to help you with anything that's giving you any problems, anything that you're not sure how to do it, whether you can do it, or really just any question you have at all about how Stathead works or kind of what you're finding in there. Please reach out to us. We're also on social media. So you can hit us up at Stathead or bball_ref on Twitter. And either way, if you send us questions, we'll be happy to respond and make sure that you get the information you need to get the most out of Stathead. Lastly, if you're not a subscriber, you can try Stathead for free for 1 month. If you go to the Stathead sign up page, which I can't do because I'm a Stathead subscriber, and sign up for the monthly subscription plan. Your first month is totally free and you can cancel it at any time. So just go ahead. You can go ahead and just sign up for the Stathead subscription. Try it for a month. Try it for a couple days and see what you think. See if you like it. See if it can help you. Whether you're trying to follow the sport as a fan, whether you're trying to create content, write for a blog, write for a newspaper, podcast, social media, whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to find maybe some angles, if you live in a sport where a state where sports gambling is legal, or you play fantasy basketball, whatever the reason, Stathead and its tools are going to help you, and they're going to be really cool and fun to use. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And I really appreciate you coming, and I hope that this helped you learn a little bit about all the cool stuff that you can do in Stathead. with the WNBA. We're going to be rolling out these new improvements like the new team game finder. There's going to be more updates along the way. And obviously all season, there's going to be new stats and new storylines to follow. So I can't wait to see how the rest of the season turns out. And I can't wait to use Stathead to follow it. And I hope this gives you some ideas of how you can do that too. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And the rest of the team really appreciates you coming here too. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Thanks.